Shadows in the Wilderness. It was supposed to be a weekend escape from the mundanity of city life. For Sarah and Ethan, a couple who thrived on outdoor adventures, camping had always been their way of reconnecting with nature and each other. They had planned this trip meticulously, choosing a secluded site deep within Redwood Valley, far away from the hum of civilization. "This is going to be amazing," Sarah said, her voice brimming with excitement as she tossed her backpack into the trunk of their aging Jeep. "Just us, the stars, and no cell service." Ethan chuckled, adjusting his cap. "Yeah, no cell service is the best part. Let's see if we can survive without Instagram for 2 days." The drive to the valley was uneventful, the scenery shifting from bustling urban landscapes to rolling hills and dense forests. By the time they arrived at the campsite, the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues of orange and red. As they unpacked their gear, a chill wind swept through the clearing, rustling the towering redwoods that encircled them. Sarah paused, glancing around.
"It's so quiet,"
she murmured. Ethan, busy assembling the tent, glanced up with a grin. "That's the point, isn't it?" She nodded, but couldn't shake the faint unease creeping into her chest. The silence was almost unnatural, as if the forest were holding its breath. By nightfall, the campfire crackled merrily, its warm glow warding off the encroaching darkness. They sat side by side, roasting marshmallows and sharing stories. Laughter echoed through the clearing, and for a while, Sarah forgot her earlier apprehension. But then, it started. A faint rustling sound came from the underbrush, just beyond the firelight's reach. Sarah froze, her marshmallow slipping off the stick and into the flames.
"Did you hear that?"
she whispered. Ethan tilted his head, listening. "Probably just an animal. We're in their home, remember?" She nodded, though the explanation did little to calm her nerves. The rustling stopped, leaving an eerie stillness in its wake. For the rest of the night, Sarah found herself glancing over her shoulder, the shadows cast by the fire playing tricks on her mind. The next morning dawned bright and clear, dispelling the unease of the previous night. They spent the day hiking through the forest, marveling at the sheer grandeur of the ancient trees and the vibrant greens of the undergrowth. It felt good to be out in the open, surrounded by nature's beauty. "This is exactly what we needed," Ethan said as they stood on a rocky outcrop, gazing at the valley below. "Just look at that view." Sarah smiled, her earlier fears forgotten. "It's perfect." By the time they returned to the campsite, the sun was setting once again. They cooked dinner over the fire, their laughter and conversation filling the clearing. But as the night deepened, the forest seemed to come alive. The rustling returned, louder this time. Sarah's heart raced as she scanned the darkness, her flashlight cutting through the shadows. "Ethan, something's out." He stood, gripping a makeshift club he'd fashioned from a sturdy branch. "Stay close to the fire. Animals don't like..." But it didn't feel like an animal. The sounds were two deliberate footsteps, slow and measured, circling their camp. Sarah's grip on the flashlight tightened as the beam caught glimpses of movement between the trees. "Hello?" Ethan called out, his voice firm. "If someone's out there, you are trespassing." Silence. Then, a low, guttural laugh echoed through the trees, chilling Sarah to the bone. "That's not an animal," she whispered, her voice Ethan nodded, his jaw tight. "Let's get inside." They retreated, zipping the tent closed and dousing the fire. Inside, the darkness felt oppressive. Every sound outside seemed amplified, the snapping of twigs and rustling of leaves like thunderclaps in the silence. Sarah clutched Ethan's arm, her breath Hours passed, each minute dragging like an eternity. Eventually, exhaustion claimed them, and they fell into a restless. Sarah awoke to the sound of whispering. It was faint but unmistakable, a chorus of voices murmuring just outside the tent. She nudged Ethan awake, her eyes wide with, "Do you hear that?" He listened, his face paling. The whispers grew louder, forming words they couldn't understand. It sounded like a language long forgotten, guttural and sinister. Ethan grabbed his flashlight and unzipped the tent slowly, his movements cautious. The beam cut through the darkness, revealing nothing. The forest was empty, the whispering abruptly silent. "Here is no one there," he said, though his voice lacked but Sarah knew better. She could feel Ida presence lurking just beyond their sight, watching. The following day, they decided to cut the trip short. As they packed their gear, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. The forest seemed darker. The air, even the birds had fallen. Their hike back to the car was tense, every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves sending their hearts racing. The sense of relief when they finally reached the Jeep was palpable. They tossed their gear into the trunk and climbed in, eager to leave the valley behind. But the relief was short. As Ethan turned the key, the engine sputtered and died. He tried again, but the Jeep refused. No, 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 he muttered, slamming his hand against the steering wheel. This can't be happening. Sarah's eyes darted to the tree line, where shadows seemed to shift and move. Ethan, we need to go. They decided to follow the dirt road on foot, hoping to find help. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the... Then, they heard it. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, following them. Ethan spun around, brandishing his club, but the path behind them was empty. We're not alone, Sarah whispered, her voice. Ethan nodded, his grip tightening. Just keep moving. The footsteps grew louder, closer. Shadows danced around them, forming shapes that seemed almost human, but not quite. Panic set in as they broke into a run, the forest closing in. When they finally saw the lights of a ranger station in the distance, relief flooded their bodies. They stumbled inside, gasping for breath. A lone ranger sat at the desk, his expression calm but serious as they recounted their ordeal. You are lucky, he said, his tone grim. People go missing in these woods all the time. Most never come back. Sarah shivered, Ethan's arm wrapping protectively around her. What's out there? She asked, her voice barely above. The ranger hesitated, then said, some things are better left unexplained. Just be glad you made it out. Weeks later, back in the safety of their apartment, Sarah couldn't shake the memories of that night. She'd wake up drenched in sweat, the sound of whispers echoing in her ear. Ethan tried to comfort her, but she could see the fear lingering in his eyes too. One morning, as she brewed coffee, she noticed something on the kitchen counter. A single twig, damp with dew, lay in the center of an otherwise spotless surface. Her blood ran cold. They hadn't brought anything back from the forest.